Welcome to the Stop Digging Community Podcast, powered by the nonprofit A² Lamp Groups. I'm Christina, a joyful founding board member since 2014. Your truly unique self-development journey begins today with the first step. Stop digging.
Hey, welcome to the Stop Digging podcast. We have another episode. This will be airing in July, and we are so excited to have our next guest. We haven't ever had an athlete, a former athlete, on our show before, but there's so much about athletics that is transferable in every career, in every walk of life, in living, and we just want to tap into that. For people who listen to our show on a regular basis, you know that I am not an athlete. So I am very curious about what's going on. I like my tacos. I don't like to exercise, but I might change my mind after listening to our next guest. So let me tell you, because I don't know much about it, I did a lot of research on this. I'm going to just share a little bit with you. Always remember that it's in our LinkedIn podcast group called Stop Digging, and all of the research is there. You can check it out for yourself. I encourage you to go on there and share. So this actually blew my mind because I wasn't aware of this, but according to Korn Ferry, 95% of all Fortune 500 CEOs were college athletes. That was surprising. I had no idea. I guess it makes sense, but I thought that was huge. 95%. Psychology Today, 94% of all female CEOs were college athletes. That also blew my mind. If you're a regular listener, we work with entrepreneurs, startups, and people transitioning careers, and that just blew my mind. I found a research paper by a student in the Manhattan Business School that said that it didn't even matter the outcomes. It didn't even matter if it was a team sport or an individual sport that you were doing in athletics, but the result was that athletes who went into business, and not necessarily a startup, but went into a working career, they reported higher success working for startup companies than anyone who's worked at a startup company who was a non-athlete. And that kind of made my mind wrap around the idea of mindset, the way they see success and the way they see opportunity and obstacles. And I really just have a big sense of curiosity around that. So I looked a little bit further. I found the Global Athlete Entrepreneur Foundation, which I didn't even know existed, but they do a lot of research. They found that 78% of NFL retirees experience financial distress in the first 2 years afterwards, and 60% experience it within 5 years after retiring. But they also said that 20% of all pro athletes become entrepreneurs, which it makes sense. We've all seen great people out there doing something new. But here's what caught my attention. They said that 60% of those fail within the first 5 years. And that speaks directly to the fact that you can be successful, but you still need to gather additional skills, such as entrepreneurial skills. But it made me think about what kind of transferable skills that athletes are bringing to the table. And I found an organization called the Spotlight, and they record and do articles on sports and people entering business from sports. And they cite an article, and you'll see the link in our Stop Digging LinkedIn group. They found 5 core tools that pro athletes use when they take it from career to career, and they build success using these tools. And I'll just list all 5 of those right now. First is disciplined peak mindset. Second one is personal branding. They leverage that when they come out of their athletic sport. Third is venture diversity, adding a portfolio that goes beyond their own sport performance. Social impact relationships. Athletes get put out into the community a lot to promote things, and they want to maintain that when they're out of the sport. And so they're choosing to enter into businesses and entrepreneur things that have some social impact. And the last thing is personal experiences leveraged. We're talking about global works, things that are scalable, scaling success that goes holistically or internationally. And there's nothing that does that more powerfully than if you're an athlete and you're moving from your first career, pro career, to a second or third career. And we actually have somebody here today who can speak directly to that. And the reason that's important is because no matter what the statistics, nothing matters as much as people and their own stories. And so I'm proud and honored to have this guest on, and we have a special co-host, Chris, which you got introduced to him in our last episode. Chris, you have a relationship with this amazing person. You got to tell us, who is our guest today?
Well, today's guest is Glenn Parker, who I met in college before he was a professional athlete. And I have to tell you, it has been a great friendship for me for the last 30 years. But what I am excited about is that Glenn has been successful not only in a professional sports career, which, wasn't guaranteed when I met him, would you, and and then what I find most fascinating is that he is successful after his career. And really that's what I want to dig into, is kind of what Susan was saying, is what were some of the things that you did that scaled from being a successful professional athlete on to broadcasting, now on to working for the University of Arizona in their foundation department. I think you also were a successful offensive line coach. So if you look at someone who's been able to build 3 or 4 successful careers after professional football, this is the guy you want to talk to. And we were talking about some of the statistics, and we hear about people who had trouble financially, and those make the news. But we don't get enough of the Glenn Parkers and other gentlemen and other ladies who were successful in pro careers, but then move on to be successful after being on the field. So that's what I want to unpack today with my good friend Glenn Parker. And just got to say it, go Cats.
Go Cats. Bear down, Arizona. Well, thank you guys, Susan, Chris, for having me on. There's a lot to unpack in those statistics you gave out, Susan, and I think if we can start there to kind of give a groundwork, it'll mean more as the conversation moves on. And the fact that they found so many ex-NFL players who were not successful. Well, first off and foremost, that did not differentiate between people who retire and people who are forcibly retired. The NFL is a performance-based business. So the average right now is about 3.2 years someone plays. And the average is not the guy making that giant sum. He's making at the league minimum. So he's only making at most maybe 400 or 500 grand a year, which is 50% taxed. He gets taxed everywhere he goes. He also has to pay his agent fees. So at the end of the day, he might have a few $100,000 in the bank, and he's behind by 2 or 3 years everybody he went to school with. So there's that. Now, if you take out people like me that played more than 10 years, the actual average falls to less than 1 year, which means they do not even make a couple of hundred grand. They end up being out of football with less than $100,000, searching for something to do. And now you see why bankruptcies and all those failures are so actual high compared to the real number of people who are successful and then go on to be successful. So there's when I say there's a lot to unpack, because that's just one part of it. And then of course, when you talk about 60% of those people who become entrepreneurs fail, well, that's about the normal for businesses anyways. Businesses fail within the first 5 years at an overwhelming rate. So those stats, they do mean something, obviously, but it's how you unpack them and end up looking at them. You have to look at those guys that played a long time and what made them successful. The female athletes that play a long time and reach a high level, what makes them successful. And there are differences, not all of them physical, a lot are mental, and that's kind of where we start from. So if I looked, Chris, just very first, it's habits. It's habits that get you from whether you're successful at the pro level, whether it's in entrepreneurship, whether it's in your second career, your third career, it's what are your habits? And there's the old saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. And if you're going to skip on the little things, you're going to skip on the big things. It's just what's going to happen. And that's where athletes will not They just will not. They will do whatever it takes. If it means I've got to be there early to get the treatment for some injury, or the time to get my stretches and my mobility work in before I have practice, before I do anything, they will make it happen that way so that they are in the place to succeed. You're it's very hard for most people to understand that level of commitment for something, for a outcome that is less than guaranteed. And not a lot of people like that bet. Athletes love it.
So I have a curiosity question around that. Not having been an athlete myself, how much of that is generated from within you as like a new athlete? Like I don't know how. I want to hear more about your story being recruited by the NFL, but and the teams that you were on, but how much of that is coming from out of you versus coming from your team, like telling you you must do this or you must do that, and just training you by requiring those things?
That's a great question. I don't know if anybody knows that answer. I know this. I did not play high school sports. So I'm not your typical person, but in maybe many ways, maybe I'm the best person to answer this, because I didn't play high school sports, because I was not disciplined or mature enough at a young age. I wasn't one of those prodigies. Yes, I was a great athlete till I was about 14, but I hung it all up. I'd rather surf. I'd rather be at the beach. I'd rather be doing anything than being yelled at by some coach, because it becomes, at that age is when it becomes less fun and more business. And I just wasn't ready for it. And I was not mature enough for it. But that being said, whenever some coach says you can't coach mindset or you can't coach toughness, is a liar. He's lazy or she's lazy. You can coach it. I had coaches that did it for me. They taught me that. They made me look at what I wanted most in life and how I was going to get there. And a famous saying by Dick Tomey was, you know, never give up what you want most in life for what you want most in the moment. And the average human will always take the easy gratification over the long-term gratification. And athletes will always take the other side. Successful athletes will always give up what they want today for the prize that is tomorrow.
Oh, I gotta jump in here. One of the great things that I heard as a definition of integrity, and I think it was from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, was integrity is the ability to sacrifice what you want now for what you want eventually. And that's essentially what you're saying. And I would say that for the successful athletes, yes, they're doing it. For the ones who maybe have less success, they're saying, well, I'm a natural talent. I don't need to do this. And maybe they don't put in that extra effort. So that is a really good point to remember, right? To move from your immediate gratification into either your long-term goals or whatever you want. So that's a really great
And,
point.
and that,
Thank
by the
you.
way, Chris, that's been studied. I believe it's called the Copenhagen study, and where
Mhm.
they followed kids from like 1 year old all the way through high school, and they kept the kids that were at their youngest could have a chocolate with the promise of getting two chocolates if they didn't eat it, versus the one who got the chocolate and ate it.
Mhm.
Those ones were overwhelmingly more successful throughout their educational careers because they were able to have delayed gratification. And that is the secret that can be taught. It really can be, because no one's perfect all the time. There are times in my life where I have thought, you know what, I don't care. I want that piece of candy. I want it now. And those are the times in my life where I have to stop, where maybe it's gone on for a couple weeks. I'm like, oh my God, I feel awful. What is going on? And I remember, yeah, I'm doing all the things I shouldn't be doing because I want to do them, rather than the things I know I need to be doing for what I want later. And that is the nuts and bolts of success. It's just then you have to figure out how you go from there, right? Because it's not always easy to just say, well, don't do that. There's always more minute steps. No matter how small you get, there's something smaller that you have to work on.
Mhm.
I That brings to mind, because what you're talking about really is that just because you're an athlete doesn't mean you have that discipline right away. So you're talking about a development process. So going back to our original question, I know that I don't remember the teams. Maybe you could tell our listeners which teams you served on, but was there a difference in the training and development that you received about habits from team to team?
Yeah, there was. So the most impact on me was my junior college coach. He was an offensive line coach. He was an All-American for Bear Bryant. He was an Ironman back when Ironman meant the whole 9 yards. A marathon, 100-mile bike ride, and a mile and a half swim or whatever it was. He was one of the original guys to compete in those things. He was just a hard man, but he really took me under his wing. And he started with, when I went up and said, hey, I want to get a scholarship to play football. I was 20 years old. I knew I was a good athlete. There's the whole backstory to how I got to that decision to do it, but I knew I was a good athlete. And he said, okay, well, he just started with simple things. Did you brush your teeth this morning? Did you make your bed? And I was like, well, yeah. Well, and he would just then the next day ask a little more, and the next day ask a little more. And he was setting the thing of that you're made up of all your habits. And so what it did is it made me look inward and focus on my day to day. Was I doing the right thing when I woke up in the morning? Was I doing the right thing from what I wanted for that scholarship? That I was constantly moving forward and gaining a little ground all the time. And more importantly, he said something that I thought he was joking or making fun of me or being a jerk, as he said, well, you want a scholarship? Why not the NFL? And I thought, what is this guy? I just want, and he said, listen, you've never played before. You have no idea what the upside is. If you aim for a scholarship, that's all you're going to get. But you might be a lot more. You never know. So that's why I never go into a job. When I got into broadcast, I thought I'm going to be Monday Night Football. It didn't work out. I didn't have it, but I got very successful for very many years because that was my mindset. That's what I wanted. And I think it's the dynamic between that great giant goal and that little tiny habit. How do you build enough of them to get there?
After college, like what you got this bigger aspiration. How did you make that jump into the NFL? Where did you land? And did you get the same when you get that much attention and mentorship from somebody? Did it just all disappear when you made that jump?
So some of it does, yeah. It's interesting. And so for background, I never played. I went to a junior college. I played 7 games as a starter. I was recruited by just about everybody. I had my choice of schools to go to. I chose where I went for the head coach, and we can get into that in a moment. I will. And then I trained. My first year there, I knew I was a starter. I stopped right in. My whole thing was get into this Pac-12, or at that time Pac-10, become a good solid starter. And then it clicked when I started hearing my name mentioned among the best tackles in the country. And that drove me further on. Even though it was my goal, sometimes you need that carrot. And that carrot hit right after my first year at the university. So remember back then, you only had so many years of eligibility. So I only had 2 when I got to university. I had to start and make my presence known, and I think that carrot hit. So what I learned, obviously I had a head coach and an offensive line coach at junior college that instilled habits, instilled morality and team in me. I had a head coach at the University of Arizona in Dick Tomey that instilled in me that it's the team, the team, the team, and he will coach me hard but love me harder. So you start learning about criticism. You start learning about coaching. Too many people in life, including no matter what company you're in, believe that when you're coaching them, you're criticizing them. And there are 2 very different things. And I think too many people want to be patted on the back rather than be coached or criticized. And there's a famous saying about that, and Chris knows I love it. It's Norman Vincent Peale said that it is a shame that so many men would rather be ruined by praise than saved by criticism. And it's the truth, especially with young people. So once you learn that coaches want the best for you, teachers want the best for you, your teachers want the best, your parents want the best, your coaches want the best. When you start being able to tap into that knowledge base, that's your GPS for life. And I tell young kids all the time, they all have one of these phones. When they want to go somewhere, they go on maps and they go, okay, that's how I get there. Well, they have that in mom and dad. They have that in their teachers. They have that in their coaches, yet they never want to believe it. And when you're in a business, you have that in your superior. You have it in the person above them, because good leaders create more good leaders. They don't create people They don't create followers. And that's throughout history. So that is a huge part of it, is being able to recognize who's on your side and what they're there for. And so I had it when I got to Dick Tomey, and when I got to the NFL, I had it in the form of a running back coach named Elijah Pitts, who took me under his wing and guided me. And from there on out, then I became the guy at, in Kansas City, and they were at the Giants my last couple of years in the league. I became that guy that took people under their wing. I became the guy that helped by whatever service I could render to help them get to that next hump.
I want to talk about this piece of mentorship, and I think this again is where the scalability comes in. So I, on a completely different path, was an engineer, right? And it's weird that we made friends over the summer school, right? We were playing ping pong and watching David Letterman, right?
Something, yeah. I remember in the dorm, Manzanillo
Yes,
Humvee dorm. That's where we met. Yeah,
that's right.
we laughed a
Um,
lot.
and 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 I really want to hammer this point home because I had the similar experience, but it was in corporate. So my first corporate job when I was working in med device, I had a great leader, and I spoke about this on the last podcast, and I really hope that this point becomes very sticky to the people who are listening. If you just think you're a leader, your main thing is to develop other leaders, and the better you do that, the more you move from management into leadership. You're helping people grow. And I had very fortunate. I had like 3 really good, like I would call them more mentors than I would call them bosses. You know what I mean? So I think this is a really important point for our people who want to be, you know, embrace their leadership more, is to understand that important aspect of it. So I really appreciate you sharing that story. And I just wanted to tie it in. This isn't just about football. It's about life. It's about leading your team, your business, your kids, your family. These are the things that you want to do. You want to build leaders, whether it's your kids, whether it's the people you work with. This is if you really define yourself as a leader, this is a great way to kind of have a mindset of that kind of thoughts. So thank you, Glenn, for sharing that.
Absolutely. No, and you're right, Chris. It's, it, you get when you help someone, the endorphins released in your own brain are so great. When you help someone become successful, that is the best feeling in the world. When you become successful, you feel great, but you realize the people that helped you get there, it wasn't just you. You worked your tail off. You deserve it because you're the guy that did all the work. I don't ever want to go down that lane of it's someone else's success, but you're thankful for the people that helped you. And then you realize when you it's the hero arc in a story, right? Every epic story, we have the person who is the start of it. He gets mentored. He becomes the hero. Everything centers on him, and then he becomes the mentor for the next hero. That is the story arc. I mean, look at one everybody listening will know is Star Wars. You have Luke Skywalker, he has Obi-Wan, he has Yoda, and by the end, he's the wise one. He's the one that is the hero. Yet he then starts mentoring and helping others become heroes. It's forever in every movie you'll hear a story. That's what it is. And the reason being is because once you've reached that pinnacle, as it's the reason so many players go into coaching, because we know what it takes. We've been there, and we want people to feel that feeling because it feels so good for us to see it happen. So when I help someone, I get I get a better feeling now than I ever had playing, is when I help someone get there.
That's great to hear. There's one other thing I'd like to unpack with you a little bit, and you spoke about the ability to take criticism, and I remember when we were sitting and you were talking about some of the things that you did, and I remember saying to you, like, you have a broader audience than just football players. Do you remember that conversation? I think
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and I just want people to understand that you are an expert. You have built up the muscle to be able to take criticism and to understand that people are looking out for your best interest. So it'd be interesting for you, maybe if you could unpack a little bit, that kind of transition from, hey, I want appreciation, like, like which typically most people want, to, okay, I really want feedback. That's what I want. I appreciate what you're saying, what I did right, but here I want to know, how do I improve? Like, how did that arc work for you?
I think everybody probably gets to it a different way, but for me, it was when you are getting pats on the back, and then you can be betrayed. You can it can how do we put it? Where you feel like you're on the right path, you're being told you're on the right path, but yet then accolades go to people who were being criticized the whole time. So why was I being praised if I wasn't in that line? And that's where you start learning that the old saying in sports is, you worry when your coach doesn't coach you anymore, because he has lost interest in you. He doesn't think so. Your mindset has to become, I need to be coached. If I'm not being coached, I'm falling behind. Because no one's perfect. If you're never going to be so good that you can't be coached. Now, the real trick, obviously, is as you move up, is who to take it from and who not to take it from. And this is very important, particularly for young kids, teenagers, but it's also very important for people who are young in the workforce, and to understand who has their interests at heart and who does not. Because, and again, the maxims, right? Why do we have maxims or these sayings? Because they're mostly true, right? The early bird gets the worm. Coaches love them because it's the essence of human experience distilled down to a thought, and therefore you can communicate this cliche. Unfortunately, people look at them as cliches rather than looking at them as knowledge. And a great one is, never accept criticism from someone who you would not go to for advice. And so you always consider that source, but seek out those who can help you get there. And so when you're not being coached, you worry, but you at the same time, you have to be able to start discerning who's got your interest at heart and finding that path. So it's not an easy one. It's obviously not linear, but it is something you start learning how to help yourself, but how to find the people who really want to help you. And I know that's convoluted, but that's the best I can say it, I think.
That brings me to this question, because I still want you to tell us what teams you served on, because our listening audience doesn't
Oh, I'm sorry.
know. But
Okay,
after that, I want to go into what the difference is between the people who mentored you when you were in the NFL, and then you went into a second career, and I want to talk about who your mentors were in that. So tell me who the teams were, and then let's talk about your broadcast career.
Okay, so I was drafted by the Buffalo Bills in 1990, the third round. I played 7 years there, and that's the run of all 4 Super Bowls for the Buffalo Bills. And then I played 3 years for the Kansas City Chiefs. I was a free agent, moved to the Chiefs for 3 years. We were a successful team, not as successful as I think we had hoped. And then I went and played my last 2 years at the New York Giants and went to another Super Bowl there. So if people are counting, I have lost 5 Super Bowls, but you don't lose them without playing them. So
Well,
I
I
got
haven't
there.
won or
So,
lost anything because I've been in zero. So better to
well,
try and lose.
the way to lose 5 Super Bowls, playing 5 Super Bowls. That's
Exactly.
what you have to do.
You're
And
5
that's
more
what
than
I
I
love
am.
about you. I have to tell you, this is one of the things I absolutely love about Glenn. And I remember, like, people would go, how do you lose 5 Super Bowls? And I remember you just deadpan going, you play in 5 Super Bowls. And what I love is you never really said anything after that. You just went quiet.
Yeah, I think it's self-explanatory, right? Again, don't worry about criticism from people you wouldn't go to for advice. If they want to say it, let them say it. But I was there. I know what it's all about. And so then you
But
know what,
but
I moved.
a decade of being a pro athlete is pretty great. That's not, like you were saying earlier, not a lot of athletes get to do
No.
that, and that's pretty extraordinary. And I know you've won a number of awards throughout your NFL time, but what made you want to exit from it, and why broadcasting? What was that?
So I'd gone into the University of Arizona wanting to majoring in media arts broadcast journalism,
Oh, okay.
and I did that because one of my sisters was working in Hollywood at the time, actually for Samuel Goldwyn. She had gotten a screenwriter. I had done PA work, production assistant work, driving around, being a runner basically, and kind of fell in love with it. Thought that'd be a really cool way to make a living,
Hmm.
it's when you live in Southern California and your family, like my mom, who unfortunately has passed now, but she she grew up in Hollywood back in the golden era. She graduated Hollywood High School in like 1945. So that was part that movie business. Hollywood always was around our family. Most of her family still lived up in that area. So I grew up around it. My older sister did it. I just thought it'd be really cool. And I ended up getting when I was in the NFL, people would talk to me. They'd say, "Why don't you come on the radio show?" I'd do more and more. And then the thing about an NFL locker room is you're always looking for someone as a reporter who can be concise and clean and not swear. Back before we had all this open access, can you get your point across concisely? Can you get it across clearly? Can you get it across without saying the most idiotic things in the world? Can you stop and think and the mistake everybody makes is, oh, let's fill time. No, stop, be pensive, take a step, think what you're going to say and say it, and then you can move on. And the other thing is, you don't have to answer the question. You can answer the question you want to answer, not the one that they ask. And that's understanding that in a football locker room sometimes, or any sports locker room, is very important.
And you
If
got
they're
interviewed,
digging
you got interviewed a lot because of that,
a
right?
lot.
So your passion, I'm seeing a little bit of a converged thread here, because you had a passion, but they always say follow your passion, but you took your passion with you into lots of other places. You took your
Yeah,
passion for
I
media
don't say
into the
follow your
NFL,
passion.
right? So you just naturally do what you love no matter where you are. And so that's the transferable part of it.
Well,
And
I would say this.
yeah,
I'm going to correct you, Susan.
yeah,
I'm
go
going to
ahead.
correct you. I never had a passion for football until I was about 7 years into it. I was good at football. So there's a thing here, and I've said it forever, and now I hear it more and more. Is I follow your passion's horrible advice, because all you have to do is watch American Idol. Watch the first 2 days. People talk about, I have a passion for this. This is my life. This is what I'm going to do. What they have a passion for is the fame and money that goes with being a
Right.
star. They don't have a passion for the work it takes to be a great singer or great musician. They want the outcome. They don't want the work. So no, do what you're good at. Find what you're good at. Develop a passion for that. And that's what I did with football. I liked broadcast. I actually always wanted to be behind the camera. I never wanted to be in front of the camera or be in front of a mic. That was not my goal. It just turned out I was good at it. And so as I got better at it, I developed a passion for it. Now, things I have an interest in, I will always try. But when I realize, okay, I love this on the surface, I don't love this to its core, that's when I know to get out of it.
Hello, friends. Thanks for listening. A Squared Lamp Groups powers this podcast. Their memberships are tax-deductible donations that directly support their work developing people and organizations. But just for you, they're offering podcast listeners a special 40% off coupon code to join. Your benefits as a member include additional resources, perks, and access that you can use all year, including an additional 30 minutes of bonus podcast content for every episode. Simply use the code 4listeners at checkout. That's the number 4, all caps, listeners at checkout. They also are giving our listeners free gifts to use now. Go to their website, asquaredlamps.org/podcast, and download your free My Success Course of Action worksheet. There is no cost, registration, or sales pitch involved. Just click it and save. Use it to work on something significant to you this month, maybe even something that sparks interest from today's podcast. Then click to join our free but private Stop Digging Podcast LinkedIn group, where the conversation continues between you, the hosts, and our guests. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. And now, back to the program.
But it's the broadcasting that you brought into the NFL. It's the broadcasting that you're using in your third career, which we'll get to eventually. But you're like a phoenix. I know that it keeps rising up, and so you take these skills. And just to remind our listeners, because as we're going through here, you talked about some transferable skills. You talked about habits. You talked about bigger aspiration. Pick a bigger goal. Your
Yeah, always.
the end result that you think is not always the end result, the end thing. You talked about teachability and why that's important. And then the last thing you talked about, I'm not even sure how to say it, but discernment, maybe. No, knowing who, you get to a certain point where you have to know who to listen to. You can't just listen to just anybody. And so those are the things that you've carried through all the way, developed through your career in NFL and then now broadcasting. So how did you make the jump into broadcasting? What was that transition for you like? Was it hard to say goodbye to
Yeah,
NFL? And
transition. Well, yeah. So, okay, say goodbye to the NFL. I was 36. I had 2 bad concussions my last season. My wife looked at me and said, "Don't you think we're done now?" And I was like,
right.
"She wants me to be done." And when it gets, everybody, only the player can decide. And for me, I realized where I always loved going to camp. I absolutely loved being in training camp, and I know most guys would dread it. For me, it was a time. Remember, we didn't have iPhones. We didn't have cable TV, or maybe we had cable TV, but we didn't have games. I It was a chance for me to read. I brought a box of books to training camp and I read. And people say, "Well, how do you get the time?" Well, remember, yeah, you have an all-day schedule, but you got lots of little 5 and 10 minute blocks where you're waiting to get taped while you're in the hot tub, while you're doing this, while you're in the ice tub, 5 minutes before a meeting. You got dinner and you got 30 minutes before your team meeting. So there's a lot of little breaks where you can read. And I used to love that. And I loved being away where as much as I love my children, I didn't have to be a dad. I didn't have to be a husband. I got to be a football player and someone who could just then spend my time on me. And so I loved camp. And when I realized I didn't want to go to camp, I kind of realized it was time. And I was offered such a deal by the Giants that it made it too good not to retire. So that's all I'll say. They made it too good for me to retire. They didn't want me going to any other team, so they took care of me and paid me for another season that I didn't get credit for. So in the history of the NFL, my agent had never heard of that happening. So I'll take it. That's my victory. My final victory was my 13th and final season where I got paid for an entire season of football, yet didn't have a single holding call or give up a sack. So I'll take that.
So Glenn, I'd like to unpack that a little bit. Why? Why did they not want you to go somewhere else? I think I know the answer because I know you, but I'm just curious why.
Well, they had brought me in, myself and Lomas Brown, to help transition. They had a very talented defense on the team, full of Hall of Famers. Michael Strahan, Jesse Armstead, Hamilton, Seahorn, Michael Barrow. It was an incredible defense. It was very intimidating to our offense. The offensive line was very young. The offense was young, and they were getting pushed around. They had the talent to be very good, but they were allowing the age and the dominance of defense to affect them. And the coaches knew they needed balance. And so Coach Fossil, along with Jim McNally, the O-line coach, and Sean Payton, the offensive coordinator, when they brought me in, they said, we need personality and we need somebody to get this offense going. And so I was brought in for that reason. And my goal from day one was to get the offense pride. And that meant if a fight breaks out, I'm in it first. I will always support my offensive teammate, regardless if I like him or not. I don't care. I'm supporting him. I'm going in. And that sounds a little ridiculous, but building an esprit de corps on your offense is the same as the reason our defense was so dominant is because they had that. But if we could build one on offense to go along with it, we would have a balanced team that could win games. And so I was brought in, and in August of that year in training camp, the prognosticators were saying we're going to win 6 games or 4 games. And they said, how about you? I said, there's no reason we can't go to the Super Bowl. And they all laughed at me a little bit. I said, well, guys, I'm telling you, the talent's here. If I don't believe we're going to the Super Bowl every year, why would I keep playing? Again, that's that goal. That's that bigger goal. Prognosticators, you look around and you can look and say, yeah, we're going to win 4 games. Let's get out of here. Well, that's how you're going to play then. You're going to play to win 4 games. I believe I'm playing for the championship, and any athlete who's a professional at any sport has to believe that way or they can't play. So we all have that belief. Well, we ended up going to the Super Bowl. We ended up turning that offense around. We ended up having a great year. And that was one of the reasons Mr. Mara, who was always once a Giant, always a Giant, took care of me, because I did what I was asked to do, and I did it to the best of my ability without wanting anything out of it. And that was, other than that check, I like my checks. So yeah,
So
but that's why he did it. That's why I was given an extra year of
so
pay.
Chris was that the answer you thought he'd give you? Just
Yeah, I did. Because I remember, if I remember correctly, you weren't supposed to start You were
Well,
they
there was
weren't
some talk of that, but I knew I was going to start.
right, right. What I'm saying is they brought you in for the leadership, and they're and their thought process, well, you're there to mentor, and then you ended up starting.
Yeah.
I like there's a lot to unpack there, and the piece that I really like, and it kind of ties into the podcast I did last time, was the esprit de corps. Like, how do you build, right? How do you build that camaraderie, whether it's on the field or off the field? Because I'm sure you have taken that to to your to your careers afterwards. So let's talk
I
a little bit
yeah.
about how you scale that, because but just I had the same thing. The people who built a great team, we had great success. The people who were in it for themselves or demeaning, or that not a great team, not great success. So how did you? I'm just kind of curious. How did you scale that ability now to after football?
So, one, I learned that ability through being on teams that didn't have it. Even though we might have been great, we had some, but I saw how we could be better, and I knew that there was a way to do it. So one of the things I did, a couple of things that I did at the Giants, and they're going to sound really minuscule, like I mentioned the fighting, but that's the smallest part. Having fun and being the foil for the head coach is sometimes necessary. I'll be the rube. Go ahead, make fun of me because I know I'm a starter. I know I'm grading out better than everybody else. So yeah, take your shots. A great leader has to be able to be humbled in front of those around him for everybody to see that he's not held to a lesser standard than anybody else. Then there's the fact that little things. Okay, you're stretching, you're getting ready. Maybe you've already stretched, you've warmed up, you've done individual. Well, team drill's coming and everybody's sitting there. Everybody's off in their own little areas. The whistle blows. How fast can I get to the ball? And what you do is the first time you take off running and screaming to get there first. Within a month or a few weeks, everybody on that football field's running and screaming to touch that football on the ground because they want to be the one doing it. So you're building in group think. What's the object? So the first couple days it was just me. Then it was me trying to embarrass the other lineman for not sprinting. And then they'd do it. Then the run, tight ends. And then eventually everybody on that team's running to touch that football down. And it's 50 guys running instead of one guy running. And that's part of it. How do you get people to think alike? And that's one drill, thinking alike. Then every drill, that's okay, the fight. How do I get my teammates to understand and think alike? If there's a fight, we're in it together. Go. So we need guys on the same page, pulling the rope at the same time in the same direction all the time. And that's how I did it. And then the last was on Fridays. If you're in New York City, every team I'd been on did this, but the Giants did not. And it immediately struck a chord with me. Is on Fridays is a film session. You're usually done about noon and you watch film. Maybe you're done at 2, you watch till 3 or 4. O-line gets together. They didn't do it. It's Fridays in New York. They want out. Traffic's going to be bad. Got to go home. I'm like, no, that's not what we're doing. We're going to watch film as an offensive line, and you grab a rookie and you say, you're going to go fill up an ice chest full of beer, and you're going to buy pizzas, and we're going to sit here, and we're going to sit here for about an hour and a half, have a couple beers each, and watch and eat pizza and talk. Next thing you know, we're having so much fun. The tight ends want in on it. The running backs want in on it. The quarterback wants in on it. The wide receivers want in on it. And now instead of us talking it through, it's the quarterback calling a formation and a play based on what he sees on the opponents and everybody talking through. So now you've had everybody, again, one guy gets more guys who get the entire group to think and row in the same direction. And that's what I did there. So what did I do when I got to broadcast? I did this. I found that too often the talent, the guy on air, goes to the hotel, goes out to dinner, watches film in his room, and then he's done till the game. Well, that crew of people is 7 camera operators, 15 people in the truck. There's the truck driver, there's the grips. Why are we not including them as part of our team? So I did that. I made sure that on when I got into town on a Thursday night, I made sure we were all together having a quick bite. We were all getting together for a drink or whatever. And many times it was on me simply because I wanted to build a team that cared more about putting out a great product than simply putting out a product. And that's so I just kept applying that structure to move in. And then that's what I've done with my teams at the foundation. And now I'm kind of off on my own and I'm applying it to my groups of alumni that I bring together. I'm trying to do that now.
So if you're keeping track, listeners, we went through, okay, I'll go through it again just to remind you: habits, bigger aspiration, teachability, discernment, who gets to mentor you and why, and this last one, which is just so amazing and valuable. And most people in the business workplace know that this is not a norm. And when you don't have it, it's called team loyalty and excellence. And if you got somebody there to build that, to set the pace and to keep everybody aligned, that is a leadership skill that is invaluable. And you've just showed us how that translated. That one skill, both on the NFL and in broadcast, is just, it's not about the team building, just checking things off a list of a leadership checklist. This is really about people and mentorship and get it, like you said, getting everybody rowing in the same direction. People have different reasons they take jobs. For some people it's a job, some people it's a career, but if you're not all in the same going in the same direction on your final goal, how do you get everybody to show up and make that powerful play?
So
Yeah.
this is so funny to me, Glenn, because like if you would talk about two people on like different career paths, right? But here's something that I think you're going to enjoy because it's very similar to what you're saying. I always ask people to lunch when I was working in corporate, and I would work with the people on the manufacturing line because those are the people that I had to, that I was going to be either teaching my class to or I was in the project with, and so I would make sure that I have like, oh yeah, invite more people, and then that gave me an opportunity to talk to them and get their perspective because particularly in corporate, there's this top down view of everything, and I wanted to hear what the people on the manufacturing line would say. So it's just funny to me that despite being in very different lanes, we were doing very similar things. And I think this is the point that I really hope our listeners get, is that these things are scalable. Be it like, instead of being I'm the talent or I'm the project manager or I'm the VIP or whatever that is, if you're like, I'm on a team, how do I make my team better? Hearing from the people on the manufacturing line, in my case, I thought helped me be better and would help them be better, and for me to understand how to communicate to them better. So it's just kind of funny. It's making me laugh when you were saying that, and I'm like, man, I can't believe that we were on these different paths, and yet we had a similar take on how to build that kind of team spirit. And I just really, really hope that this is sticky for people. Have lunch with people. Have lunch with not just the VP or your peers, but with also the people that you're going to be working with on the manufacturing lines or whatever your industry is. Get them all going in, like you were saying about the grips and the cameraman and these, as opposed to all of us talent are getting together. Excuse us, right? Your whole thing was, this is a team to put out a great product. I mean, man, I got chills just thinking about that, how important this is. If we had a thing on culture eats strategy for flipping breakfast.
Yep.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. Absolutely does. Every great team is built on culture. Then it's everything else. And if it's there's an old saying, I'll give you my playbook, you won't be able to stop me. If I've built the culture in football, you can have my playbook. You ain't going to stop us. You can know right where the play is coming, and you're not going to stop us because our culture's too good. We're too strong. We don't give up. We don't bend. We don't break. We know what we're doing.
And you have each other's back. And I was going to say, loyalty is so rare. I can tell you that, whether it's in the workplace, in your personal life, in the NFL, or in your alumni foundation that you work for, which I want to talk a little bit more about too. People don't know how to be loyal anymore because they don't know who has their best interest in mind, which goes straight to that scalable skill that is so lacking, which is the discernment to know who to listen to. Just because somebody's the best in their field doesn't mean that they're the best mentor for you.
Well,
Well,
absolutely
like,
correct. Because
wow.
some people are the best in their field. They might not have all those skills. That's why maybe they were great in their field, but they weren't a great leader. Maybe they were the best in their field, but they're not a great coach. You can have a lot of people like that, but it's the ones that transfer that to others and create other leaders. That's truly, if a person, when you look at people who were exceptional, no matter what, I don't care what business or athletic endeavor, if they were successful and they were great, and then they were able to create greatness, that's a leader. And I'll tell you, a person, there's a couple of NBA guys, first and foremost, Larry Bird. Larry Bird was so good on the court, but yet look what he's done as a general manager and what he's done as a voice in the league. He has done it. Magic Johnson, there's another one. Steve Kerr, bear down, right there. Bear down, Chris. Steve Kerr from the University of Arizona, leader here, leader on the court with Michael Jordan, and look what he's done. He's changed the game of basketball because of his leadership skills at Golden State and being the head coach there. So it's rare that someone is both a top performer and a great leader. And when they are, those are the guys where they kill it. They're so good.
That's amazing. Okay, so you did your broadcast journalism for a while. What made you make the jump from something that you've always been interested in, from that into this alumni association? Like, what happened
Well,
there?
I'm not completely done with broadcast. I do
Oh, okay.
podcasting, obviously, with people, and I get offered for jobs, and sometimes I think about them or not. What I wanted to do, it was about family, and
Mm.
my two oldest daughters were high school and college athletes in soccer. Well, in Arizona, soccer is a winter sport, so I didn't miss anything. I got to see their whole seasons, all their games, because football was over. But my two youngest, my twins, boy and girl, they played fall sports. And I looked at myself in the mirror and said, my kids are never going to care that I called another football game. They're going to care if I was at those games. So all I said was, I got to take a break. I was offered a really good package by a major network and I turned them down. My agent said, you'll never get back in. I said, yeah, my kids are never going to care. My kids don't care. My kids want me there. And that's what we have to understand sometimes, what's most important. And what most important for me was not the gratification of getting another contract with a major network and being on TV. It was watching my children become successful and becoming leaders on and off the field in high school sports. And both of them also played college sports. So that was what I wanted most in life, was for them to know they were loved and cared for by their dad, and not that he was on TV somewhere when they had a game.
Okay, I got to say this because that speaks to the first thing that you were talking about, being able to delay gratification for something
Yeah.
that you want more. And this is a scalable skill that went to your life priority. And I'm absolutely flabbergasted at that, because I will tell you this, everyone thinks that they can make the right choice, but if you can't give $1 when you have $100, you're not going to give $1,000,000 when you have $100 million. It's the
Right.
small habits. And if you haven't learned how to make those decisions along the way, that you're missing that clarity when it comes before you. And what you just described is somebody who has been making those decisions for so long that when the clarity was there, my kids come first. This is my priority. That's my end goal. That's my higher aspiration. You were able to say no to a lucrative deal that a lot of people would have said, hey, you're crazy. But it was
Yeah.
no, it was a good decision for you. And I love that, because that is the ultimate of why you should practice these things, because so many people get get that opportunity at the end, but because they haven't been practicing it all the way along, they miss that clarity and they do the wrong thing.
Right. And who's to say what's right or wrong, in your own life? Obviously,
Right,
it
for
would all
your own
depend.
self. Yeah.
But I had been successful in football and broadcast. I wasn't, money was not the issue. It was, what's the most important thing? that is in front of me, and it was those kids, just my children. It's my wife. It's being a family man, and so that's always taken priority. And so, I think what ends up happening is, again, larger goal, like you said, the delayed gratification. But honestly, it's everyday habits build to that. It's not simply what is it that they like to say that everybody, I think it's Jordan Peterson says it, everybody thinks they would have fought the Nazis and they would have, and then yet so many people join. And we see it even today. People will join a cause just because it's a cause. They have no idea what they're looking at, and yet they'll join. They'll sign any petition that sounds good without actually reading what it means. So if you practice that your whole life, that discernment, you'll look a little deeper into things and figure out what you're willing to do or not do in order to have success.
There's one other thing that Glenn, me. This podcast could be 3 hours long. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's a piece in there that I want to unpack because I think it's really important, and I don't want it to get lost. And that is the idea of finding things that you can do better to that habit, that little piece, like you said. Hey, I'm going to go touch this. I'm going to be the first one to touch the football. Hey, I saw that this could be done a little bit better, and I think that is like an awareness around you of I don't know if you want to call it curiosity or if it's just like, that's interesting. Why do you do that? And again, this is very scalable because it's what I did in corporate. Like when I was in the manufacturing line, I had time before, like you said, before you had phones and you could play, games or, doing other things. I was on the manufacturing line and I didn't have anything to do because I'd already trained the people on the manufacturing line what to do, but I was there in case a problem came up. So I just walk around and go, why are you doing that? And I think that kind of curiosity leads to, ooh, that's interesting. Maybe there's a better way to do it. And I I I didn't want to skip over that one because it could have gotten lost. And I think if you have that kind of mindset of, ooh, that's interesting, and you ask clarifying questions, you're going to be able to find better solutions or solutions to make that 1% better than that ad that, goes to 2%, that start multiplying and creating that culture and that success, not only for
So
yourself, but your team.
let me stop you for a second, Chris, because here's the thing that I find most people, the failure of most people starts with the fear of failure.
Mhm.
So they won't ask or look at how they can do something better because they're afraid to fail, and they're afraid to fail in front of others. They're afraid to ask that question because they're afraid they'll get reprimanded. If you have a fear of failure, it's paralyzing. It paralyzes you right then and there, and you can't move on. So, you and I have often talked, Chris, in the past that, I pick up a lot of hobbies and then I discard them or I stay with them, just depending. And if I want to learn something, I go learn it. And then if I find a better way to do it through learning it, then that helps me because it's, oh, I really should have done it this way or that way. And I think everybody has that ability, but too many people are so afraid of what others are going to think. And that goes back to what we talked about, Susan, of worrying about who's criticizing you. I mean, I truly don't care what almost anybody in this world thinks of me. I really don't. And it frees you up. It is one of the most freeing things in the world to not care. And I don't care what most people think of me because I wouldn't go to most people for advice. The people who I truly care about are the ones that I worry about my actions and how it might affect them. But that's it. And so I think people don't look so often, Chris, to see how they can do it better because of that fear of failing. And personally, the only way to grow is to fail.
But
That's
sometimes
success.
let me present the flip side of that too, because in addition to that, I think people also don't know how to succeed. If you don't know what it looks like, it's hard to know when you are. And like you said something earlier in the conversation that do what you're good at. It didn't necessarily mean what you loved. It reminds me of something a professor once told me in when I was in college, and she was like, "It doesn't matter what you do. You if you want to be successful in something, if it's not working out in one thing, do something else. Be successful in one thing." Um, she happened to be somebody who became a pro tennis player, even though she went to school, got her doctorate, and wanted to do something else. She became a professional tennis player, but it was that success that prepared her for success in other things. And so she
Yeah.
was saying, don't get stuck on, I have to be successful in this one thing only. Do what's in front of you, do what you're good at, like you were saying, and build success so you know what it looks like. And then you can
Yeah.
transfer it to
And
other things.
so you brought up, you just kind of made that point of, I said I have a lot of hobbies and I try them and I like them or I don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm good at something and I still don't, I keep it up because I've lost the interest there because I see what success looks like and it's not as involved or it's not as cool or whatever reason. But you're absolutely right. You try things and you say, okay, I'm good at this, but maybe it doesn't lead anywhere. So there is no success. Success comes in a lot of forms, but without attempting it, you don't know what success is. You just said it. So the flip side of being afraid of failure is not knowing what success is, as you said. Then they go hand in hand. And so understanding that to try, to get out there and give it your best shot. And you're going to find out sometimes that what you thought you wanted to do is not at all what you're very good at, and what you're really good at might be something that never entered your mind. And I would have at 10, I would have said I was going to be a professional football player. At 18, I'd have said, you're out of your mind, I'm going to the military. And at 24, I was a professional football player. So who knows? But it was farthest thing from my mind when I even started thinking about getting a scholarship in football.
There's another piece here that I think is important. And you were talking about the fear of failure. And so for me, my part, and I'd be kind of curious on your perspective on it. My thought on this is, if you know who you are, then you understand when to take criticism and when not. I remember you saying, like, I don't care what other people think about me. And that's one of those things I had to learn when I was performing stand-up comedy. I remember when I first started, like, if there was one person in the room that wasn't laughing, I was obsessing over that one person, as opposed to just going, look, I'm not for everybody. And I had this discipline before I would get on stage, is I would take a breath and I would go, I'm going to have fun. And I'm going to take as many people who want to come along with me as possible. And then I just let it go. And knowing that, it might be a crowd that doesn't connect with me. And then I don't blame them. I go, well, what could I have done differently? So it doesn't mess with your identity. So there's these kind of co-pieces to it, of one, being very comfortable with who you are, right? And
Right.
two, being okay when somebody goes, you're a piece of crap. And just going,
Right.
okay, you're not the person I'm really going to take it. I appreciate your point of view, but I'm not taking that on personally. And particularly this day and age, so many people get upset when somebody says, oh, you're a bald, pasty white guy. I'm like, yeah, that's who I am. Like, I know who I am. It doesn't bother me. I've been there. Yeah. I just shaved my beard. I had a beard like you. I didn't have the goatee. I had the full beard. I actually shaved it this morning, so it was making me laugh. We would have looked kind of twinsy, so I'm kind of glad I shaved it.
I'll tell you, this would be a great video podcast if all of a sudden I just ripped off my hair and suddenly I was one of was both of you. And ironically, I got a fortune cookie that said others will appreciate your good sense of humor this week. So that
There you go.
that was my moment. But I know
Well,
we need to
Chris,
tie this up at the end here because of time, and we are going to have a bonus segment that goes into some more depth with some other things in this conversation that only goes to our A Squared members. But if you're not an A Squared member, join, listen to the rest of the conversations on all of our podcasts. Other than that, my curiosity, we could talk for another hour because I want to know the books you read when you were at training camp. And I want to know what all your hobbies are that you were telling me about. I'm like dying to hear that. We'll see what happens. But Chris, do you have any final thoughts? And then let's let Glenn kind of end our session here with his final notes.
Well, look, first off, Glenn, I really appreciate you coming on this. And I've known we've had kind of parallel paths, but very different, lanes, I guess you would call it. And I really hope that people understand that. And there's something you used to say, but there's something beautiful in everyone. Like, I remember you
I was
saying,
going to wrap it up. Thanks. You just stole my thunder.
well, good. So good. I'm glad I stole it.
You have 20 seconds to come up with a new one. There.
Another way to look at it is, what you said was sticky. And that's what I want people to understand, that here, in you, Glenn, and is someone who's been successful on the field and off the field. And to take these ideas and what I would say is, if you can take one or two of these things that were sticky for you and implement them in your life, you're going to see change.
Yeah, absolutely. So little habits lead to giant changes is what it is. But I do say everybody in this world has something beautiful inside them. It's up to you to find it. And that could be the bum on the street. It could be the person who you hate in your office. Find it. And I will tell you this, prior to going into football, and Chris knows this, I was a very nerdy kid all through high school. Even though I had been a great athlete, I was very nerdy. And I used to worry what people thought of me and that I did these things. And, I was really into medieval history and getting into armor and hitting people. Once I succeeded at that, I learned about all these people that I got to be around a lot of people with a like curiosity for that, and found out I was dealing with brain surgeons, district attorneys who in their real world were highly successful but geeked out on something. Well, the internet today has made we all can be a geek and have a community. We didn't have that back then. So everybody's got something really good about them, really beautiful about them that's worth finding. And that's where friendships and common ground start, not in the petty differences or things that we're fighting. It's those little things that truly can make a great workplace if you know that about people.
Oh, I love that. And that is actually the ethos of A Square. We humanize people, and it's all about people. And we're just trying to introduce people back into the workforce and life force of our community. Thank you so much for being on. Hang out for a minute, and we'll see you in our bonus content for our members. Thank you, listeners. We appreciate having you.
Hi, this is Chris, podcast team coordinator for A Squared Lamp Groups. Thank you for listening and subscribing to the Stop Digging Community Podcast. Keep the conversation going. Search for the Stop Digging group on LinkedIn, and don't miss out on our next episode.